welcome to another week of the Right Stuff podcast. Jared, thanks for coming.
Yes, glad to be here.
We are honored to have George Grant with us. Pastor George Grant, hello. And as I understand it, this is the most high-stakes podcast we've ever had on the Right Stuff. Is that true?
Well, it may be. It may be. We've got crazy storms here in Middle Tennessee. I've lived here for 35 years and never seen anything quite like this. But yeah, it's been exciting for the last 24 hours or so.
I saw Doug Tenable warning all the Californians to stay away from Franklin, Tennessee, because they could be sucked up into a tornado.
Wow.
Yeah, and we're full. So
Right.
Please,
Well, it's not about that. It's about the tornadoes.
We had a new members class at our church a few months ago, and 40 of the 42 people in the new members class were from California.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
I hope those are good. I hope those are good transplants. It's gone pretty well so far here in Idaho.
Oh yeah, we're getting the good ones.
Okay, good.
I fear for California because all the good ones are either going to Idaho or coming to Tennessee.
Amazing. Well, we're having you on because today, out now, I don't know when today is, but out now, previous to this interview, Canon has released The Last Crusader, the untold story of Christopher Columbus. Now, this is not the first publication of this book, but it is now back in print. George, can you just tell us a little bit about the book? Tell us about the project.
Yeah, the book originated because of the quincentenary of Christopher Columbus's famous voyage in 1492. At about that time, from about 1991 and then all the way up to the present, there have been a slew of Columbus debunkers.
Okay.
And even the defenders oftentimes get Columbus wrong. And so because there is a really, really remarkable story behind the man and his great enterprise, I felt like it was something that needed to be told. So when I wrote it, progressivism and woke ideologies were all of a sudden starting to appear, but they had not yet taken hold. They have fully taken hold now. And so I feel like the book is actually more relevant today than it was when I first wrote it. And I'm so delighted that it's back in print because lots and lots of classical schools and homeschools have used it through the years as supplemental reading. So
even back then in the 90s and now, what do you see is at stake? What are the stakes of getting Christopher Columbus right?
Well, first of all, the stakes are the character and nature of Christendom, which is what Columbus was attempting to defend. And he wasn't on the pursuit for discovery of new lands or of gold. What he really wanted to do was to defend Christendom. He was living right at the end of the Reconquista, the conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, that Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon prosecuted. But it was the end of a 400-year-long process to subjugate the Muslims who had come in 711 and conquered that territory. So the story is the story that connects, Charles Martel and Charlemagne and the expansion of Christendom, the building of cathedrals, the recovery of a sense of European civilization, and the desire to eventually win back the entire Mediterranean.
So, George, I'm thinking just before people click away and say, I reject this entirely, I think George is on something. There's no way that Christopher Columbus was the last crusader. Can you drop some quick facts? It's on the back of the book, but can you proof text this for just a minute? So I actually want to hear the history in a moment, But I'm afraid people will just think that you're totally out to lunch and totally not buy this. They're going to say 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But George is over here saying that he's the last crusader and he was really involved in this Reconquista situation. What are the cold, hard facts about what he wrote in his journal that can quickly say, hey, I'm not making this up?
Well, his proposal to both Portugal and to Spain, as well as an initial attempt to reach King Henry VII with the same proposal, was that he thought it was possible to sail around the globe and then mount a rear guard offensive against the Muslim horde. So his idea was, let's land behind the Muslims and retake the Holy Land, all of the lands where Christianity was birthed and grew, and rid the Christian world of the menace that had been haunting the Mediterranean at that point for 500 years. So he wrote about this. He wrote about it in both his journals as well as in a remarkable little book entitled The Book of Prophecies, in which he goes through the scriptures as well as church history, weighing all of the ideas that would eventually give birth to a Christian civilization, not just individual conversions through evangelism, but the transformation of art, music, literature, ideas, technology for the sake of the kingdom of Christ. He wrote about all of this. It is in the documentary record, and it's actually indisputable. Virtually all the historiography that says otherwise is projection and supposition.
So I'm glad that you said that because I wanted to keep everyone on this podcast. I think that kind of phrase. I mean, I had the privilege of reading your book, so I mean, you say, look, there are references to the shame of Jerusalem in captivity throughout his journal. He quoted the Old Testament passages profusely and applied them prophetically to his enterprise of discovery and redemption. So this is not you stretching anything. This is like you basically just exegeting the facts.
Yeah.
Given that, I'd love. Could you set the history? You kind of in chapter 2, you talk about kind of the setting. Like you talk a little bit about. You even get into like feudalism and whatnot, and then
Right.
kind of how Christopher Columbus is. Can you just tell us about the context and the man and some of the basic facts?
Sure. Well, he was 3 years old when word came to his hometown of Genoa that Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire had fallen. This was catastrophic news throughout the Christian world. Many believed that the end of the world had come, that there was no hope any longer. The greatest city in all of Christendom had fallen captive. And to his dying day, he remembered the sense of dread of the tolling of the church bells on that day. And it was one of those kind of indelible marks. Everybody who was alive during COVID will see this dividing line between what came before COVID and what came after COVID. The same thing of 9/11. Those of us who lived through 9/11. It's before, TSA and after TSA. And for Columbus, that was the dividing line, the indelible mark in his life. So he was the son of a humble weaver and cloth merchant, but living in the city of Genoa, that meant that he was early on introduced to the sea, and quickly in his teen years became incredibly proficient navigator and sailor. He was a part of a number of expeditions to Chios in the east and as far as a search for Ultima Thule in the north, in other words, past Scotland and towards Iceland in the North Atlantic. So he had a lot of experience. but it was during a time when he was living in Porto Santo, those two big islands, Madeira and Porto Santo, just off the coast of Portugal in the Atlantic, that he began to realize that all of the driftwood that was washing up on the shore of the island coming from the far west had to mean that there was land across the sea. And he began to seriously study. One of the things that's remarkable about Columbus was his curiosity and his pursuit of knowledge. He became an expert in map making. He became an expert in navigation. He became an expert in the history of the exploration of the Atlantic, from the Phoenicians and the Carthaginians right through to the Romans. And he began to keep really careful journals early on, and thanks to his son, Ferdinand, much of that has been preserved for us, including his great book of prophecies. So we have all of this documentary evidence. Spain was largely, most of the south of Spain and much of what today is Portugal was still a part of the Caliphate of Cordoba. And it wasn't until January of 1492 that Spain eventually was completely united under the authority of the two Spanish kingdoms, the Kingdom of Aragon and the Kingdom of Castile. One of the things that we tend to forget is that there was no such thing as a country called Spain at the time. The Iberian Peninsula had been divided up between as many as 12 different kingdoms as the Reconquista moved southward. If you've ever read the Song of Roland, you know that the Reconquista began as early as Charles Martel and then extended into the reign of Charlemagne. And so it was a long, slow process over the course of 500 years. But eventually, in January of 1492, all of Spain was recovered for Christendom. And it was at that point that Christopher Columbus got a hearing, both from the King of Portugal and from the Queen of Castile and the King of Aragon. He was able to get his expedition of 3 ships, the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, and of course he set sail and discovered the Caribbean islands that would begin the age of discovery throughout the Americas. He made 4 journeys over the course of his career, established a number of trading settlements, made contact with Native Americans, though he has been accused of being an enslaver, he never enslaved any of the native peoples. His great concern was to evangelize them. But he never really understood at first. It was really not until his 4th journey that he came to the conclusion that what he had discovered was not Asia, but another continent altogether. The way he figured that out was he measured the flow of water that came into the Caribbean from Venezuela, and realized he was able to calculate the size of the South American continent based on the flow of the water into the Caribbean. So he's really a remarkable scientific mind, and was self-educated, but was, in a sense, a father of a kind of classical tradition. His son, Ferdinand, carried that tradition on, and his son attempted to create the first, in a sense, the first Google. He created the world's largest library, and simultaneously created the world's largest botanical garden. He attempted to collect every single printed book in the world in every single language. And he came very close to doing that. And he invented bookshelves and all kinds of other things because at the time, bookshelves didn't exist. Books were laid out on tables. So all of that paints a picture of an extraordinary mind, an extraordinary legacy, and all of it was aimed at attempting to preserve and protect Christendom.
All right, I definitely have one follow-up question. I have two follow-up questions, but
that was fast.
Yeah, I mean the first one.
fast.
Did you just say that he measured the flow of water and determined the size of South America?
Yeah, it was pretty accurate. The only thing that he didn't take into account was Patagonia. So the tail end of Argentina and Chile, which extend all the way down to almost to Antarctica. He didn't calculate that part, but the big body of South America, he was able to calculate the size to an extraordinarily accurate degree based on the flow of the water flowing, fresh water flowing into the Caribbean.
Wow. Okay. So my second question is in his journals, and this is on the back of the book. We have Columbus writing, "I have already petitioned your highnesses to see that all the profits of my enterprise should be spent on the conquest of Jerusalem." And I'm wondering if any of those profits actually did make it to that end, or if so, what percentage did that get accomplished?
It did not get accomplished, as is often the case. He was met with skepticism, with political opposition. There were those who were incredibly jealous of the fame and the wealth and authority that came to Columbus as the Admiral of the Ocean Seas, as he was called by Ferdinand and Isabella. And so his efforts were stymied. His son, Diego, and his younger son, Ferdinand, fought pretty much for the rest of their lives to redeem Columbus's reputation and to push forward his agenda. But by that time, we were into the Reformation. There was a tremendous amount of internal conflict throughout Christendom, and the threat of Islam was by that time all the way over on the eastern Mediterranean as Suleiman the Magnificent began to push up as far as within 45 miles of Vienna. And so all of the military attention was turned to that. And of course, you have the famous G.K. Chesterton poem about Don John of Austria fighting off the massive fleet of Turkish ships in the eastern Mediterranean. That all takes place after Columbus's death and into the lives of his two sons.
That poem being Lepanto, is that right?
Yes, the Battle of Lepanto.
Yep.
So, George, you write this book, and you're obviously not just doing a history. You actually mentioned in the front kind of different kinds of history, and I think you call yours maybe a philosophical history, if I understand that right.
Moral philosophy, which is attempting to take the lessons of the past and apply them to the present. So it's not just sort of an antiquarian glimpse at the past, a curiosity about the past. It's what lessons can we learn and then apply those lessons to our own time.
Right. So that's actually my question. What do you want people to do with this? What are the applications?
Well, the first thing is we've got to stop the vandalizing of history. So part of what I am attempting to do is to recover Columbus's true character. He was not a faultless man. He wasn't, this is not a hagiography. I'm not trying to portray Columbus as a saint, but it is really important for us to have a clear-eyed view of those who have gone before us so that we can understand how we got to where we are and how we can move forward to where we desire to go. So my first goal is just to recover the true story of Christopher Columbus. Secondly, I want us to begin to understand that the battle against radical Islam is not a modern phenomena, and it's not something that our forebears in the faith didn't care about, didn't focus on. And this is not in the book, but it could easily have been in the book. Every single one of the reformers, Calvin, Luther, Butzer, Beza, Knox, all the way to Jan Comenius, all of them saw Islam as the single greatest threat to Christian civilization. And they said so. So part of it is we need to have a clear-eyed view of what the battles actually are and how long enduring they are. Third, I want people to start to realize that some of the categories that we assume in the modern world are as new as World War I or even World War II. In other words, the boundaries of nations and the character of nationalism and all of that. That is a very modern sort of ideological innovation. And so part of what I'm trying to recapture is a sense of a very unfamiliar world that laid the foundations for our freedom, our opportunities, our great experiment in liberty that we enjoy today. And then fourth, one of the things that I really wanted to accomplish in this book was to have fun. I wanted the telling of a great story to be, a real fun yarn. And so it's told in an adventure story kind of way.
Okay, I'm glad you brought up that. I'm going to key in on the second to last point you just mentioned by quoting you here, page 26, and I'm going to leave it in the. I'm going to leave it undefined, but you'll know what I'm talking about. I read this so that people think, what is George Grant talking about? And then you tell us what you're talking about and why it matters. So it's a little ode. You have a little ode to a particular subject. It was a romantic riddle. On the one hand, it was marked by the greatest virtues of morality, charity, and selflessness. On the other hand, it was marred by the flaming vices of perversity, betrayal, and avarice. It was often timid, monkish, and isolated. Oftener still, it was bold, ostentatious, and adventurous. It was mystical, it was worldly, it was tender-hearted, it was cruel. And you kept going on. I'm betting that you actually remember what you're talking about, but it might catch people by surprise. What is it? What's the subject that you're talking about there, and why does it matter?
Yeah, I'm describing the medieval world. I'm describing the incubator of the flourishing of Christendom.
Sorry, do you mean the Dark Ages?
The Dark Ages, feudalism.
Well, yeah, the Dark Ages were anything but dark. If you want to look for darkness, go to the Enlightenment. That's where the darkness starts to descend. I mean, you think about what the medievals created. You walk into any cathedral, walk into any town square that is still preserved from the medieval age, walk the streets of Milan or Florence or Monza, you start to realize, oh my word, what they created was glorious, magnificent, and it's unrepeatable, even with all of our technological advances. So,
even with AI?
AI, we can do it with AI, right?
But the thing is it wasn't a perfect age, as we know. There were all kinds of flaws. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to portray the character and nature of this vibrant civilization with all of its strengths and all of its weaknesses, and show how Columbus emerges out of that to launch his great adventure.
One thing that stuck out to me, so I grew up in Texas in
Me too.
A Christian little corner of Texas, and one thing that just stood out to me was just how much you talk about the zeal of the Lord and the Great Commission being something that animated Christopher Columbus. And I think at a certain age, like in junior high, early high school, I would have heard that and thought, if I didn't know the noun of who you were talking about, I would think you were talking about a pastor. Like, oh, this man will go on to preach many great sermons. But instead, he's like measuring, the water to find out where the heck in the world he is. He's navigating the seas. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, like, is this a product of those dark ages and that education?
Well, he did have a mentor who guided him during a time of particularly deep grief. His first wife died, and it threw him into a deep, deep quandary, questioning, as one of those kinds of events will often do. But in God's good providence, there was a pastor who came alongside him and began to guide him. And one of the things that we tend to forget is that Roman Catholicism, prior to the Reformation, was not monolithic. There were all kinds of strands and strains, and eventually Blaise Pascal will be the heir of one of those strains that traces all the way back to Fra Angelica and others in Portugal and in Spain. And that's the mentoring that Columbus got. So he was introduced to the scriptures. He was introduced to the richness of Old Testament prophecies. He was particularly taken by Isaiah and the portrayals of the coming Christ in the prophecies of Isaiah. It took him by surprise in some ways. It became a deep and abiding comfort for him, and it gave him that zeal that drove his enterprise and his vision ever after. Almost any other man would have given up. The number of times he was told no, the number of times at a trial in Salamanca that he was declared to be foolish and insane. He persisted, and what made him persist was this sense that God was calling him to something larger, something greater, something beyond himself. What's really interesting was that he wasn't a megalomaniac, like so many people who think that they're called to great things. He actually believed that he was building for a day that he would never see. That's something that he was able to inculcate in his sons. We see in both Diego and in Ferdinand, but particularly in Ferdinand, a real sense of covenantal succession and a desire to build on his father's legacy. And what Ferdinand accomplished in terms of a lasting legacy of a botanical garden and the most extraordinary library of the day really is a testimony to his father's equipping and training.
So, George, you mentioned covenantal succession, and it kind of threw me back to something you said about feudalism and in the kind of the recent establishment of thinking along nationalism lines. I couldn't help but think you were quite sympathetic to this feudalism take in this medieval world that you mentioned. Basically, you say feudalism aimed at a genuine covenantal unity. And you talked about it being personal in nature, not merely institutional. I mean, you mentioned the problems with it as well. But it left me thinking, yes, we really do have problems here post-Enlightenment. And what are we, can you give us something, if you were going to try to say, I'm assuming your message is not exactly, let's make feudalism great again. But there's something that we actually have to fix. There's some kind of reformation. There's some kind of advancement. What are the key principles? What are the key takeaways? What are, and even on a structural level, what can we do to recover some of the goodness that was present back then?
Well, part of what feudalism attempted to do was not only have sort of these almost tribal affiliations that we associate with the feudal world. The main structure of feudalism was built around the idea of jurisdictionalism, that there are spheres of authority. So the family has certain responsibilities that the state or the kingdoms do not have. Kingdoms have responsibilities and authorities that the church does not have. The individual has certain responsibilities that transcend the boundaries of mere church, state, and family. And so the attempt to recover jurisdictionalism has been one of the things that Reformed theology has seen as a hallmark over and over again. Abraham Kuyper in his Verzyling notion of pillarization in the society, the attempts of Beza and Blutzer to create jurisdictional authority in Geneva and Strasbourg. So the takeaway for us is feudalism understood how important it was to keep the authorities in their own lanes, so that you have kings who are kneeling for days in the snow, begging for forgiveness for sins that you would think is one of the most powerful. This is the Holy Roman Emperor, and he's on his knees because he understands the separation of powers, the separation of authorities in the jurisdiction between church and state. One of the things that we have lost are those boundaries. So rather than saying, let's make feudalism great again, I would say, let's make families great again. And then let's make drawing lines of separation great again. Let's focus on covenantal succession again. Let's build for a day that we will not see again. The great cathedrals were built because of the feudal mindset that we look down the line generations beyond our own lifetime, and we invest in that. We have a hard time thinking, 5 years ahead of time. But in the feudal world, they were thinking 500 years down the line. Many of the cathedrals took 300, 400, 500 years to build, which means that every single day, the people of Vienna would show up at the Stephansdom, and they would be building for something that they knew that neither they, nor their children, nor their grandchildren, nor their great-grandchildren would ever see finished. Feudalism, by its jurisdictionalism, its future orientation, and by its emphasis on the authority of families and covenantal succession, they were able to think long-term. And that's extraordinary. That's worth recovering.
Bang.
It's great.
Awesome. Well, listen, Pastor George Grant, we're thankful for the opportunity to get to talk with you. We hope everything's good with the storms there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I've never felt more alive podcasting knowing that a tornado is possibly just down the road. Thank you.
This has been great. I'm excited that the book is out, and I love the cover, by the way. It's
okay, good.
It's a great cover. So
good. We're excited to have it.
It's a great job.
And we look forward to you reading it. So
Yep, I'm on it. I posted the cover on social media, and I already had 3 people say, "When's the audiobook coming out?"
The demands they come quick. Awesome. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Good to see you, George.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Cheers.